I think the reality is there's a new crisis every day
Yeah.
in almost every sector, and
Yeah.
so it's almost like crisis fatigue for people.
Welcome to the Pink Couch podcast. We are addressing a really contentious issue, which is top of mind for everyone in the travel industry, both in Canada and the US. And of course, that is the slump in cross border travel. It's a huge topic. It's costing the industry a fortune. I believe the last figure I saw from the US Travel Alliance was something like close to $30 billion. That's not monopoly money, that's serious cash. We ran a story this morning about the fact that Canadian carriers are pulling back more capacity, another 10%, which is 450,000 seats. So, Shannon, I have to commend you. You are tackling this situation head on, trying to make a difference on both sides of the border. How do you practically see yourself addressing the fact that Canadians, well, and Americans to a lesser degree, I would imagine, but you can address that, do not want to travel to the States?
Yeah, maybe what I can do is just sort of set the table for how I pardon for how I got here.
Yeah.
So I'm the CEO of the Adventure Travel Trade Association, and while we're a US based organization, our members are in 100 countries around the world. We have dozens of Canadian members and partners. And it was early in 2025 when we realized that things were going sideways very quickly because of the US government's behavior towards Canada. And it obviously had a massive ripple effect. Not ripple feels like an understatement. Um, but what I did is
A tsunami wave more than a
a
ripple.
tsunami, that fits better. That fits better. And so I reached out to a couple of my peers, my colleagues who run other travel associations, one being CATO, the Canadian Association of Tour Operators, and one being the USTOA, the US Tour Operators Association, and just said it feels like we should all be talking. And those two said we just started talking about this. And so we created this organization called the Beyond Borders Tourism Coalition, and we now have, I think it's 11 members that are a part of it, and those are all Canadian or American tour or travel associations, so all trade groups. There's also a few tour operators that are involved as advisors, and they come in underneath those associations to sort of support them. So really, we've been meeting every 2 weeks for the last, I think, 8 months as a group, whoever can make those meetings, and we talk about everything from lobbying issues within the US to how do we support each other. We've been inviting each other to our conferences to come and speak. And really, the whole point of this organization was to try to elevate the conversation that had gotten so vitriolic and so negative. And trust me, I understand why there's vitriol, and I am appalled regularly with things that are being said and done. And so, really, this was an effort for, especially I think from the U.S. side, to say to our Canadian sisters and brothers, look, we don't have any beef with you, and of course they
Yeah.
said we don't have a beef with you either. And so we're trying to really, so we've really strengthened a lot of high level industry trade ties to basically help each other out where need be, to put pressure where possible, to try to remind people that the common Canadian and the common American are not against each other. And so we've got, I think, three Indigenous tourism associations, and then the rest it's bus and adventure and tour operators, but we're all meeting to come together and just try to make a difference in this really toxic environment.
Yeah. I think what you're doing is, as I said, I think it's commendable. I really, the effort and the energy that you're investing in trying to hold back what we called a tsunami wave is quite brave. The thing that for me is challenging to wrap my head around is travel is a very emotional decision, right? I mean, we all invest so much around the hopes and dreams of the experiences that we'll have. And certainly the US presents umpteen opportunities for amazing experiences. I think, Canadians love the US. I mean, I just saw it's the anniversary of Route 66. I mean, the imagery, right? The nostalgia that comes with that. It's the
Mhm.
movies, Hollywood, everything, New York, like it's all it just feels like this cornucopia of fabulous experiences. On the other hand, there's fear.
Yeah.
So we can't deny the fact that when social media, our news channels, and our screens are flooded with images of ICE, grabbing people off the streets, some Canadians are saying they're absolutely terrified. And
Yeah.
who can blame them, right? So, for you, you want the best, and I see everything that you're doing, which makes so much sense to come together with Canadian operators. But if push comes to shove and a Canadian consumer has a fear and has other choices, it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. I sympathize completely with this. And, I would never try to pressure someone to travel somewhere they don't want to, because that's antithetical to the whole point of going on a trip, on a vacation, is you want to go for positive reasons. And so I completely get that. And, in some ways we're doing this just to acknowledge that these things don't last. I
Okay.
think back to so many crises that have happened in the tourism industry in the past, and there's always that initial, situation. People stop going. There's all the associated problems with it. And then suddenly 5 years later, you look back and you go, "Oh, remember that?" I
Right.
mean, even COVID is an example of that, where one of the efforts that we made during that time was just to keep our community connected to each other, just to remember this too shall pass. This is not going to last. And so the best thing that we can do is really support each other in any way we can. I mean, I think this is my favorite thing out of this coalition, is just to sit around the room with a bunch of industry heads who,
Mhm.
technically, do we compete with each other for members? A little bit here and there, but we have so much more in common than we do in regards to competing with each other. And everybody has just laid that down and said, yes, we're here for you. I just got invited to speak at one of the other coalition members conferences. I invited all the leaders to our last summit that we put on. And, Nina, if I think one of the things that I hope that Canadians and Americans who are being thoughtful about this will realize, that tourism is soft diplomacy.
Yeah.
There's nothing like having somebody from another country walk into your restaurant, or for you to walk into their hotel, and to have that human connection and realize we are not each other's enemies. We
No.
aren't. And the fact that we even have to have this conversation is so wild to me. Canada and the US have been best buddies forever. And so the fact that we're dealing with this is truly a shock, but it's real.
And
And
it's
I
expensive.
well, and so one of the things that we made a decision to do for 2026 is, we're doing our biggest event, our Adventure Travel World Summit, in Canada.
Are you?
And we're
Wow.
doing it in Quebec in September, and then
Where in
we made it
Quebec?
in Quebec City.
In Quebec City. Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful. What a
Yeah.
great choice. Okay.
So we'll be there in mid-September with probably around 800 adventure travel professionals from all around the world. Usually we have between 50 and 60 countries represented in that group. And then we made a strategic decision to not do an event in the US this year. And we just felt like the pressures that our members feel, the fear that you talked about
Hmm.
of coming from outside the US and coming in, it became increasingly just the biggest headwind, and it just didn't feel like it made sense. So So we'll be celebrating our biggest event next year, or this year now, and now they're in 2026 in Canada. And I think our European partners are going to be really excited. I know our Canadian counterparts are thrilled. And Quebec and Canada have been great partners of the ATTA for a very long time. I think we've been working with Quebec since 2008
Wow,
consistently.
good to
And,
know.
and out of our 20 Adventure Travel World Summits, well, if you go to this year and go 21, three of those will have been in Canada.
Well, we're a great adventure country. There's no question about that. Lots of land to explore, lots of experiences. Listen, I love your sanguine attitude to the issue. And what I'd like to ask you is, since we have now an audience of travel advisors listening to us, what sort of advice, because you've been studying the issue for a while, you've been talking to your counterparts, you have a level of expertise around the issue. What do you advise them?
I mean, if you're asking what do I advise them in regards to selling, I think this is where industry relationships are so important. So, for example, I'll give an example that has nothing to do with Canada or the US. I went and traveled in Iraq in 2017, and ISIS was still in full swing there. The reason I felt fine going, and the point I'm making here is I knew the operator. And I knew the operator well, and I trusted him. And I called him and I said, I'm going to bring my 16-year-old son on this trip. So I would really like some assurance that you feel like we can be safe on this trip. And he said, absolutely 100%. Here's all the safeguards in place. Here's the protocols. Here's the strategies. Here's the reality of where the trouble is and where it's not, and we're going where it's not. And my son and I had honestly a life-changing experience on that trip, but it was because I knew the operator. So I would encourage advisors, lean on your relationships. Whether it's Canadians looking at the US or US looking at Canada, and good responsible operators are going to be honest. And some may say, based on XYZ, I recommend that you hold for 6 months. And or they may say, look, we got you covered. We'll be waiting for you.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that you're going to be okay. So I think those industry relationships matter. I think being smart and choosing time and place is, of course, important, and the type of trip. But there's no candy coating this. We're in a crisis. We're in a crisis, and it does not seem to be abating anytime soon. And so I think the message from us, from the 11 associations that are a part of the Beyond Borders Tourism Coalition, is just to say we are here holding ground. We are working together. We are pushing our politicians on this side of the border to say, and of course, politicians usually mostly listen to financial reasons. And so we're able to say,
Exactly.
look, American companies are losing billions and billions of dollars. And this could go on for a long time, the worse it gets. So please pay attention to this.
And that
Uh,
really sort of comes to the crux of the matter, and it's sort of an unfair question, but you to some degree answered it. What we in other countries, and I think to a large degree in the US, can't seem to wrap our heads around is why is there nothing happening to change some of these policies? We all agree, the majority agrees, some of it is completely irrational, and yet it persists. So we're like, where is the pushback? Where is the pushback? I think if we saw more concrete pushback, we
mhm.
likely would, the confidence level would rise quite a bit.
Sure, sure. That's a great point. And that's, as an unfunded and brand new organization, as the Beyond Borders group, we're figuring that out. We do have a PR company that's doing pro bono, where it's a Canadian company and run by a dear long-term industry friend of mine. And so she's working with us to start ramping up the PR so that travelers can see what's happening. But I think, Nina, I think the reality is there's a new crisis every day
Yeah,
in almost every sector. And
yeah.
so it's almost like crisis fatigue for people where they're like, I just I can't even follow all of the issues anymore. My brain wasn't built to process this much.
I'm
Um,
laughing, but I should be crying. I totally
I
hear what,
know.
yeah,
Oh, trust me. We did do an event, I will say on a positive note, and again, this is a little bit out of date, but we did our North American event in 2025 in Denver, Colorado. And things were already ramping up, but not to the level that they are now. And we were very concerned. We ended up beating our attendance numbers. Normally, that event sees about 350, 3 to 350, and I think we hit 425. So it was attended better than any event that we've done in North America. And a full 50% were from outside the United States. And there were no issues with any of the attendees at the borders anywhere. So thankfully, and we had people from Lebanon and Japan and Brazil and Mexico and Canada and so on and so forth. So that went well. That being said, things have gotten tougher and tougher since then, and
yeah,
that's why we made the choice not to do one in 2026 and just protect ourselves
yeah.
as a US based
I think the
organization.
country ban is not in your favor with something like that at the moment, but
Right.
that too will pass. I'm convinced of it. So
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say one thing I would love to say is we had this amazing speaker named Tim Martin. He was a Canadian ambassador to different countries around the world for his entire career. And he's spoken at least two of our events, maybe three. And he was involved in the Kimberley process that eliminated conflict diamonds from the supply chain. And so that, it was a really thorny issue. And he said that, they came to the conclusion that you needed the magic triangle in order to solve these really thorny problems. And that means a combination of government, private, and public. Um, and so you've got, I'm sorry, a nonprofit. So you've got government, private, and nonprofit honing in on a problem to try to solve it. And I'll never forget that Tim said, don't forget, always support the good guys. No matter where they are in the process, no matter who they are, support the good guys because that's the only way that these really difficult situations can be solved. So everybody in our coalition, whether Canadian or American, is basically saying to all the people in their network, support the good guys. It's okay that they're American, blanket boycotts. Everybody's free to do what they want, of course, but support the good guys, and that's really what we're trying to do. And it is an uphill battle, but I firmly believe that this too shall pass.
I agree. And it's not as though Canadians dislike Americans per se. That, there's certain Americans that we're not too thrilled with, but overall, I mean, we're very, very close. How could
We
we
share
not be
that,
close? Of course, we're close. We have relatives, friends, we've gone to school. Yeah, it's a
right?
symbiotic relationship. Shannon, thank
Absolutely.
you so much for taking the time and for all the effort that you're putting into this Beyond Borders coalition alliance to really, help the industry. So I think it's wonderful, but I look forward to hearing a lot more from you, and I look forward to the tide or that wave shifting to the other direction soon.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. And thank you for having me on. And I'll just reiterate, since I know most of your audience is Canadian, is there's a lot of us here in the travel trade that think incredibly highly of you as our colleagues. We care about you. We care about your business. We know a lot of you care about what's going on this side too.
Yeah.
And we'll just continue to fight the good fight.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Nina.